My family has owned this 120-acre ranch in the Virginia Hills since 1948, 120 acres of pure freedom, and one private dirt road built in 1950. For over 70 years, this road belonged only to us, connecting our home to the state highway. It was our private link to the outside world, quiet and peaceful. My grandfather, Arthur, built this road with his own hands. He used a vintage yellow Caterpillar D4 bulldozer he bought after the war, clearing pine forests day by day. He cleared the thick pine woods, packed down the stubborn red clay, and laid the gravel. Every single inch of this path represents his sweat, labor, and vision. For decades, we maintained the road ourselves. Every spring after the snow melted, my father and I would fill potholes, clear ditches, and spread fresh gravel. We never asked the county for a single cent, and we never asked our neighbors for help. It was our private driveway, and we took great pride in keeping it clean. Our cattle ranch thrived in this isolation. The cows grazed in peace along the fence lines, and the only sounds were the wind in the trees and the birds overhead. The gravel path was smooth and solid, strong enough to support heavy tractors and cattle trailers. My grandfather built it to last for generations of our family. But 5 years ago, the landscape changed. A greedy developer bought the quiet valley bordering the eastern edge of our ranch and cleared all the ancient trees. They paved the green meadows and built a massive gated community called Oak Ridge Estates. Suddenly, 100 suburban houses sat right against our property line. These houses were packed closely together, a sea of gray roofs and concrete driveways. It was a stark contrast to our open fields and weathered wooden barn. Almost immediately, the new residents realized that our private dirt road was a perfect shortcut. Driving through our ranch saved them 15 minutes of traffic. They started speedrunning their large SUVs down our quiet road, kicking up clouds of thick yellow dust that settled on our pastures and ruined the clean air. The quiet mornings were replaced by the roar of engines. SUV after SUV sped past our house, ignoring the speed limit and showing no respect for our privacy. The constant traffic began ruining the road Arthur had built. Potholes grew larger, gravel washed away, and our cattle were constantly spooked by roaring engines. Our cows stopped grazing near the road, retreating deeper into the hills. Some even broke through fences in panic. The damage to our ranch was getting worse. It was no longer a quiet ranch, it felt like a busy highway. I tried putting up private road and no trespassing signs, but they were ignored completely. One driver even rolled down his window and threw trash onto my lawn as he drove past. They treated my family's heritage like their personal driveway. The residents of Oak Ridge Estates simply drove past the signs, sometimes even waving at me insolently as they sped by. They felt entitled to the shortcut. I stood at my gate every afternoon, watching car after car trespass on my property. My frustration grew with every cloud of dust that choked our horses. But the real trouble started when the Homeowners Association of Oak Ridge Estates, a power-tripping HOA board, decided to intervene in the most ridiculous way. It began with a formal letter delivered by certified mail. I opened the envelope expecting some sort of apology or a request to discuss the traffic issues. Instead, I found an official-looking document demanding that I pay them a road maintenance assessment fee of exactly $15,000. The letter claimed that since our private road connected to their subdivision, I was automatically a member of their association and subject to their rules. It warned that if I failed to pay the full $15,000 within 30 days, they would file a lien against my ranch and begin foreclosure. They were trying to steal my family land over a fake bill. I immediately called the number listed on the letterhead, determined to get answers. A receptionist answered and transferred me to the HOA president. Within seconds, a sharp, arrogant voice filled the receiver, full of absolute confidence. It was a woman named Karen Vance. She spoke with the absolute authority of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. She was cold and sharp. I told Karen politely that there must have been a mistake. I explained that my ranch was established in 1948, decades before her subdivision was even built. I told her that the dirt road was private property, entirely owned and maintained by my family. But Karen didn't want to hear the truth. She wanted control. She cut me off mid-sentence, her voice dripping with condescension. She told me that under county master plans, all connecting roads were public use easements. She claimed the HOA had the legal authority to manage and assess fees on any road that connected to their gated community, regardless of who built it. "Listen to me, mister," Karen sneered. "We are upgrading the neighborhood, and that dusty road is an eyesore. It devalues our property values. You will pay the $15,000, or we will take your ranch." The board does not negotiate with stubborn farmers. She then slammed the phone down. I stood there on my porch, listening to the dial tone, a slow anger building in my chest. They wanted to pave my road, charge me for it, and steal my ranch. I vowed that they wouldn't get a single inch. I spent the next 3 days consulting with a local real estate lawyer, an old family friend named Frank. Frank pulled up the county land registries on his computer and laughed at the HOA's letter. He confirmed that their demands were legally laughable. He told me to write a formal rejection letter, stating clearly that my ranch was exempt from HOA jurisdiction. I drafted it and mailed it immediately. I thought they would back down once they realized I wasn't intimidated. I was wrong. A week later, I woke up to rumbling near my eastern boundary. I drove my pickup truck down the dirt road. When I arrived, my blood ran cold. There was a commercial flatbed truck parked right across my property line. 2 construction workers were unloading heavy steel posts and rolls of chain-link fencing, preparing to build a permanent barrier across the road. Supervising the operation was Karen Vance, looking completely out of place on the dusty ranch. She had a clipboard in her hand and a smug smirk. I stepped out of my truck, closing the door firmly, and walked over to them. I kept my voice calm and steady, just like my father taught me. "Karen, you are on my property. Stop this work immediately and move your truck off my road," I said. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't your road anymore, farmer," Karen said. "Since you refuse to pay, the board has voted to declare this corridor as an abandoned easement. We are installing a security gate here to block unauthorized access to Oak Ridge Estates. Residents will have key cards, you will not." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying to block my own road. "This is my private land," I said. "You have no right to build here." Karen stepped closer, her face twisting with rage. "Try to tear it down, and I'll have you arrested for destroying HOA property," she yelled. "The county map shows this road as a shared corridor. You are just a stubborn nuisance holding back the progress of this entire community. Workers, keep installing the posts." She turned her back on me. I knew arguing with her was useless, so I took out my phone and took photos. I captured clear photos of the workers digging on my land, the truck's license plate, and Karen standing on my property line, ignoring my warnings. I told her quietly, "You've been warned, Karen. This is trespassing and property damage." I walked back to my truck and called the sheriff. When the local deputy arrived a few hours later, my fears were confirmed. The deputy looked at the construction, then at my deeds, and sighed. "This is a boundary dispute," the deputy said. "Since the HOA has a county survey showing an easement, I can't arrest them today. You need a court order." By the next morning, the HOA had finished the gate. It was a heavy steel structure, complete with a massive padlock and a private entry sign. I was locked out of my own road, forced to drive 3 miles through a rough tractor path, just to reach the main highway. It was incredibly frustrating. The HOA residents were delighted. They had their shortcut, and their HOA president had successfully locked out the pesky farmer from the main road. But Karen wasn't satisfied. A few days later, a massive yellow excavator arrived at the boundary line, accompanied by a crew of commercial paving workers. I drove down to the gate and confronted the foreman of the paving crew. He told me they had been hired by the Oak Ridge Estates HOA to widen the road. They planned to dig deep drainage ditches and prepare the road for asphalt, destroying the historic dirt path my grandfather had built 70 years ago. The construction crew began marking the boundaries, spray painting bright orange lines directly on my private pastures and fences. They planned to widen the road by 10 feet on each side, which meant tearing down my grandfather's old wooden fences and cutting down ancient oak trees. I stood by my fence, watching them paint the orange lines on my land, feeling a cold fury. They were attempting a hostile takeover of my ranch. I knew I couldn't stop the excavator by standing in front of it. I needed something far more powerful than words. I needed to find the original papers. I drove back to the ranch house and went down into the dark, dusty basement where my family kept all the old land records and historical documents. There, under a stack of old agricultural journals and toolboxes, sat my grandfather's heavy green iron chest. It hadn't been opened in a decade. I blew the thick layer of dust off the lid. The heavy brass padlock was rusted shut, but I found the old key hanging on a nail behind the workbench. With a loud, grinding creak, the old key turned in the lock, and I lifted the heavy lid. The scent of old paper, pine oil, and history filled the room. Inside the chest were dozens of yellowed documents, handwritten ledger books, land surveys, and black and white photos of my grandfather Arthur. I began sorting through the papers, searching for the one document that could save my ranch. The original legal deed to our land from 1948. At the bottom of a leather portfolio, I found a large, heavy parchment paper tied with a faded red ribbon. It was the master deed signed by the governor. I carefully untied the red ribbon and unrolled the parchment under the desk lamp, tracing the elegant cursive writing with my finger. The document detailed the exact boundaries of the 120-acre ranch. As I read the descriptions, a wave of relief and excitement washed over me. The deed contained a very specific clause about the dirt road, stating, including a private road, constructed and maintained solely by the owner. This corridor remains private property, exempt from any municipal easement, county dedication, or public right-of-way. It was ironclad. But that wasn't all. Tucked inside the deed was a detailed land survey map from 1949, hand-drawn and signed by the county surveyor. I compared the historical coordinates with the modern map of Oak Ridge Estates, and I noticed something that made me laugh out loud with joy. The developer of Oak Ridge Estates had made a massive, multi-million-dollar mistake. They had relied on a faulty county tax map instead of deeds. They assumed our property line ended at the tree line, but our actual deeded boundary extended exactly 50 feet further east into their development. This meant that the HOA's new security gate, the road widening construction, and the fences they were building were entirely on my private property. Even more shocking, the HOA's luxury clubhouse, a massive 2-story stone building that cost them nearly $500,000, was built on my land. The clubhouse foundation was sitting 5 feet inside my legal property line. The HOA had built their crown jewel on land they didn't own, all while trying to fine me $15,000. I had the ultimate leverage, and it was time to use it. I immediately called my lawyer Frank. I emailed him high-resolution scans of the 1948 deed and the 1949 survey. 10 minutes later, Frank called me back, his voice filled with excitement. "Arthur, this is a gold mine," Frank said. "They don't have a leg to stand on. We can shut this down today. Get a certified surveyor out there." Frank contacted a certified land surveyor named David, who agreed to perform an emergency boundary survey the next morning at dawn. David and his team arrived with high-precision GPS equipment and spent 4 hours measuring the coordinates, tracing the line exactly as described. As David worked, I saw Karen Vance pull up in her black SUV. She stepped out, wearing her bright red business suit, and walked over, looking furious. She demanded to know what we were doing, claiming we had no right to survey Cape Aw property without the board's permission. She was shouting. I didn't say a word. I simply handed her a laminated photocopy of the 1948 master deed and pointed to the specific section about the private road. Karen snatched the paper from my hand, her eyes scanning the text. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "This is garbage," Karen spat, tossing the photocopy onto the dirt road. "This is 70 years old. The county tax map is the official document." I picked up the photocopy and smiled. "Karen, the tax map doesn't establish property rights. The deed does. And your gate is sitting on my land. And so is half of your clubhouse," I added. Karen froze, her eyes darting towards the clubhouse in the distance. She laughed nervously, trying to bluff. David, the surveyor, walked over, holding a clipboard with his fresh measurements. He looked at Karen and confirmed the coordinates were correct. "Ma'am, the gentleman is correct. Your gate, your fence, and 5 feet of your clubhouse foundation are sitting on his deeded property," David said. Karen's face turned white. She looked at the clipboard, then at the orange surveyor stakes David's team had just hammered into the grass. The stakes lined up directly through the clubhouse lawn, cutting right across the corner of the building. The encroachment was massive and undeniable. Without another word, Karen got back into her black SUV and sped off, her tires kicking up gravel. She knew she was in deep trouble. The next morning, despite the cease and desist letter, Karen Vance ordered the excavator to start digging up my road, determined to pave it by force. As soon as I heard the engine roaring, I called the county sheriff directly. I told him the HOA was actively destroying my private property. Within 15 minutes, a county sheriff patrol car sped down the road, its blue lights flashing under the bright daylight. Sheriff Thomas stepped out, wearing his tan uniform and a wide-brimmed hat. He walked over to where the excavator was working, looking stern. I met him there, holding the certified survey map and the 1948 master deed. "Stop the machine," Sheriff Thomas ordered, his voice booming. The operator shut down the excavator immediately. At that exact moment, Karen Vance arrived in her black SUV, stepping out looking triumphant. She walked up to the sheriff, expecting him to support her. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. Remove this farmer," she demanded. Sheriff Thomas spent several minutes studying the survey map and the historical deed. He compared the boundaries with the orange surveyor stakes. Then, he looked at Karen, his expression hard. "Ma'am," the sheriff said, "this deed is the legal authority. You are standing on this man's land." "But that survey is outdated," Karen shrieked. The sheriff cut her off. "This is a certified survey based on a master deed. You are destroying private land." "I don't care about your old paper," Karen screamed. "We are paving this road. Workers, start the machines and keep digging." Sheriff Thomas didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, grabbed Karen's arm, and spun her around, pulling handcuffs from his belt. "Karen Vance, you are under arrest for criminal trespass, property damage, and ordering the destruction of private property. Hands behind your back." Karen gasped in shock, screaming, "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." But the sheriff clicked the handcuffs shut firmly. He led her to the back of the patrol car, her red suit looking ridiculous against the dusty gravel. The construction crew watched in stunned silence. The sheriff turned to the foreman and said, "Pack up your equipment and leave immediately. If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing." The crew packed up quickly, and within 10 minutes, the heavy machinery was gone. The road was quiet again, though scarred by the digger. With Karen arrested and the construction halted, Frank filed an emergency lawsuit against the Oak Ridge Estates HOA for property damage and encroachment. When the HOA board members learned that their clubhouse was built on my land, panic swept through the community. They faced absolute ruin. They realized that a judge could order them to demolish the clubhouse, which would bankrupt the association. They immediately begged for a settlement. We held the settlement meeting at Frank's office. The new HOA president, Richard, apologized profusely for the board's aggressive behavior. He admitted they had relied on faulty county surveys and had been blinded by Karen's demands. They were ready to accept whatever terms I proposed. I laid out my demands, and they were non-negotiable. First, the HOA had to pay exactly $240,000 for road damage. Second, they had to remove the security gate immediately, restore the dirt road to its original condition, and rebuild my wooden fences. Third, they had to purchase the 5-acre clubhouse strip of land from me for $450,000, or demolish the building. Richard swallowed hard, looked at the other board members, and signed the agreement. They chose to buy the land to save their clubhouse. In total, the HOA paid me $690,000 in damages and land fees, paid directly from their reserve funds. The massive payment forced a special assessment on every homeowner, and the furious community voted to dissolve the entire HOA board immediately. Karen Vance was removed from the board, and her power trip was over. I used part of the settlement money to restore Arthur's beautiful dirt road. I also installed a heavy-duty double-locked gate right at my actual deeded property line, blocking the shortcut for good. Now, the residents of Oak Ridge Estates are forced to drive the long way around, adding 15 minutes to their commute every single day. As I sit on my porch looking out over the quiet dirt road, I know my grandfather's legacy is safe. The road remains ours, built by hands that love this land.